All right, welcome back to the Naval News segment. Today we're going to talk about the Chief of Naval Operations, Gildy. Building Australian nuclear submarine program could take decades. This is really bad news for Australia, having the American Chief of Naval Operations make this statement, because obviously they have just changed from a program that was in progress where they were going to get their first submarine in about 10 years, and now it could be decades, plural, more than 10 years before they get one with the United States. And he justifies this in a piece written by Sam Legrone. Credit to U.S. Naval Institute News for breaking this story. From the piece, Sam writes, "The effort to build Australia's fleet of nuclear attack submarines could take decades for both design the boats and create the shipbuilding capacity and adequate oversight to support the effort," the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Mike Gildy, said Thursday. So, real quick, what's going to take so long is this right here, shipbuilding capacity. The shipbuilding capacity in Southern Australia has been improving with the program that they had with France, but it was really outdated. And that's what was costing, part of what was costing a lot of money and taking so many years, was improving the shipbuilding capability. Now that they're going to nuclear, it's even more farther behind now. And they're going to have to do a lot of improvements here in South Australia and other places, maybe if they want to do it in Darwin too, to build these new nuclear submarines. In the meantime, the one saving grace that they may have is they could have the Americans or the UK, if they go with the UK submarine, build the submarine until they can build them in Australia. That way they're at least getting new submarines in the interim period it takes, the decades that it will take to improve shipbuilding capacity in Australia. All right, back to the piece now. The tripartite Australian, UK, US technology pact called AUKUS has established a framework that kicked off an 18-month study effort to outline the scope of what the three countries need to start a Royal Australian Navy program. Quote, "This is everything from defense industry based in Australia to a community inside Australian Navy that's able to man, train, and equip those submarines to sustain them, to the oversight mechanism similar to what we have in the United States Navy to oversee those nuclear-powered vessels. This is a very long-term effort that will take decades before the submarine goes into the water. It could be. I don't see this as a short-term timeline," Gildy said during a Thursday Defense One conference. Quote, "We have an 18-month exploratory period that will get after a lot of these questions and help Australia come to grips with what exactly they need to do to get a path akin to the United States Navy," end quote. The Australian plans to build a new attack boat in Adelaide, South Australia, Prime Minister Scott Morrison said in a press conference last week. The nuclear submarine are widely considered to be the most complex defense construction program with a degree of difficulty in both construction and operation. The Australians with no nuclear capability domestically will need to rely on the US and the UK nuclear submarine infrastructure to develop the capacity to build new boats. Absolutely. So I agree that this will definitely be decades before Australia is building their own nuclear submarines. Absolutely. What I don't agree with is that it will not take decades for them to get their first submarine. They could have a 688 today. They could have a Virginia in 2 years. They could have an Astute in however long it takes to make that, 2 or 3 years. You know, if they just want one that's right off the shelf, you know. The biggest thing is they're going to need, and they should already have this in place, we need Australian sailors on American and UK boats, Royal Navy boats, getting experience operating these reactors and the systems that are used in the engine room there, at the very least, not to mention everything else. Pardon me, inhaled some dust there. Last week, announcements of AUKUS pact came as Canberra pulled out of the $90 billion Australian dollar, or the $65 billion American dollar, deal with France and for a dozen attack submarines. Yeah, we've already rehashed that. We're not going to go over it again. So the CNO says, hey, this whole program to get, boats built in Australia, it's going to be 10 or more years. What do you guys think of this? Is this what Australia expected? Is this what they wanted? Is this good for Australia? Should Australia have stuck with the deal that they had because they had already invested 10 plus years into the program and billions of dollars with France? Did they make the right move? Kemp says Australia needs to get real and take some hand-me-downs before they build their own nukes. I would agree with that. I think they should get some, maybe a 688 as a training platform, like weld it to the pier, but operate that plant and all the hydraulic systems and stuff as if it's at sea, just to get some experience. I think that would be a great substitute. Ravens Brigade said this info seems to be a way to leverage public opinion of the Australian public, so they feel comfortable that part of the submarine delivery will be built abroad. I don't know. 83 says need to get themselves some sort of nuclear reactor school in the U.S. That's true. Like, Rickover's program was everybody, including engineers that built other nuclear boats, or nuclear reactors, I should say, in the civilian world, still went to U.S. Navy Power School for 12 months before they could work at electric boat building nuclear submarines. That should be applied in this case as well. Everybody, officers and nuclear power enlisted, go to, is it still in Orlando? No, they moved it. Wherever the nuclear power school is now. Is it in Charleston, maybe? It must be in Charleston. Yeah, and learn how to, it's in different places. There's like one in Idaho too. I keep forgetting about that one up in Idaho. Yeah. Anyway, Clipper says, hell yeah, they're making the right move. The French deal reeked of foul play. It did. There was a lot of, I'll just say, wasted funds, which there is in a lot of military programs. People call them bribes, and there might have been bribery. I don't have any evidence of that, so I'm not comfortable making those claims publicly here. So alleged bribes. How about that? Alleged bribery. Helipilot says the military is good. Economic is not. They need time to learn the build process. Maybe a phased approach. Yeah, maybe bring some of those shipbuilders, as they're building the infrastructure in South Australia, over to Electric Boat. And what's the other one down in Virginia? I keep forgetting the name of. Ingalls Shipyard down in Virginia. And just have them get hands-on, practical experience. I think that'd be a good part of it. Okay, Ivan says, judging by the pace and constant postponement of the attack class, it could have been much longer. Yeah, exactly. It could have been much longer than 10 years before they got the first one. Because every time they had a milestone come up, Naval Group, who was building it for them, kept pushing the delivery date back years at a time. And they got the contract in 2016, so they've had the contract for 5 years total before it was essentially canceled, and they delayed it over 10 years. So for every 1 year of Naval Group having the attack class contract, they've delayed it 2 years for each one that they had. At that rate, you would never build a submarine because it's always 2 years away, 2 more years. Anyway, Ice Boy says, can we send EB guys to Australia? We sure can. Yeah, that is something that they do. We send EB guys all over the world, including Greece, to support our operations in the Indian Ocean. Of course, the Greece not in the Indian Ocean, but the submarines that operate, I don't know, out of Diego Garcia, have to go to Greece for their deployment upkeep and stuff between their deployments. Yeah. P Pistol says, is the need to have Australia build their own subs going to provide the US and UK repair facilities if war CCP kicks off? Yeah, having repair facilities that can support nuclear-powered ships and submarines in Australia would be a great boon, so that damaged ships don't need to come all the way back to the West Coast or maybe even the East Coast to become repaired. Yeah. All right, good stuff. I think that they should get the Virginia-class Block 4 is a really good submarine. It doesn't have the overkill capability that the Block 5 has because they don't need that. So it's a little bit cheaper. It's also a little bit faster. It's got some other benefits too. Yeah, so I think they should get the Block 4. Good stuff. Anyway, I hope Australia is very happy. We're happy to have them as part of a strategic partnership. All right, let's move on to South Korea. So while it may be a couple years before Australia gets their boats in the water, South Korea has unveiled a new supersonic anti-ship missile this week. This piece comes from Dehan Lee, writing for the Naval News. South Korea unveiled 5 new weapons and technologies on September 15th of this year, testing 2 of them in one day, a submarine-launched ballistic missile, SLBM, and a long-range air-to-surface missile. Not tested last week, but unveiled on the occasion, the supersonic anti-ship missile development sometime last year is capable of responding to enemy naval forces approaching South Korean waters, according to Blue House. It's a new supersonic missile, which seems to be based on the Russian Yakhont, will provide the anti-surface warfare, or ASUW, punch to the ROK Navy's future. Can I have zoom in on this? Let's take a good look at this picture. Yeah, you can see how it's got the air scoop with the nose cone in the front. Very similar to the engines on the SR-71, how it had that really pointed nose cone that helped force the air into the compressor. That's a very similar design to what the Russians have. And it seems like this is a copy of what the Russians have, because even the fins being aft of the center point is very Russian-like. So yeah, I'm not saying they copied it, but it just looks a lot like the Russian missile. Maybe they did copy it. Who knows? All right. Back to the piece. It says, it is known that South Korea's indigenous supersonic cruise missile shown to the public, the KSLBM, or Haimu 44, by the Blue House and the Ministry of National Defense on September 15th, is capable of precisely striking Chinese aircraft carriers and other hostile ships in western and eastern seas. That's western and eastern of the Korean Peninsula. South Korean Ministry of National Defense, or MND, released videos of the test launch twice on September 15th and 17th. The first video demonstrates the supersonic missile visibly passing through the target net barge. So if you look up here to the right, this white thing is like a net. So this doesn't need to have a warhead. It just literally, it's guided itself to this point and flies through it, flies through the net. That's what they're talking about. And there it is being launched. Very cool. So there's a brand new weapon in South Korea's arsenal where they can shoot this supersonic missile and hit surface ships with it. Looks like it has a range of about 500 kilometers, according to them. And it is a formidable weapon. Let's see if this... Oh, here we go. We got another quote. From South Korea's Ministry of Defense says, with improved speed, the new missile will make it very difficult for the enemy warships to respond, leading to the missile's higher survivability and destructive power. It is expected to serve as a core asset to counter forces that approach our territorial waters. And that's 100% true. The supersonic missiles give the defensive player, whether it's China or whoever else, less time to respond, because as soon as they detect it, it's going to hit you in seconds, even if it's 100 some yards or miles away. It's coming at you quick. And that's why long-range fires are so important. Let's see. Toilet Destroyer says it's a turbo ramjet design. Okay. Kemp says, interesting to see someone from our sphere copying Russian tech. Yeah, usually it's the other way around. But I've said this before. Russian rocket motors and missile engineering is top notch. And in some cases, I think, better than even the American. And I know everyone at Raytheon is rolling their eyes at me because we don't flaunt our current technology. But I mean, even going back to the Cold War, doing the research that I've done on the Russian side of the house, I've been very impressed with how advanced the 1960s and 70s cruise missiles coming out of the Soviet Union back then were. They were very advanced. They were the first to have data link between missiles. We didn't have that. I don't care what Raytheon says. They know that we didn't have that in the 60s. Russia did. Yeah. Okay, Hoggett says, interesting how ROK is straying away from typical NATO doctrine, which uses subsonic missiles. Well, I wouldn't call subsonic missiles a NATO doctrine as much as a bad idea. The reason why it was a NATO doctrine is we haven't invested the money, publicly anyway, to make supersonic missiles. We're going from subsonic to hypersonic, skipping over supersonic, which I think is a mistake, but yeah. I think we should have had supersonic missiles in the 80s, maybe the 90s, because Soviet Union's had it in the 70s, maybe the 60s, but definitely the 70s. Yeah, we've always been behind whenever it comes to speed of our missiles. I'm talking about cruise missiles specifically. Air to air, that's a different ball game because you got the Phoenix. Everyone loves to point to the Phoenix. The Phoenix missile was great, but man, it wasn't the only missile we made, right? We made a lot of other ones that weren't as great. All right, let's move on. We got a lot of news stories to get to today, so we're going to get to this one here. The Kirov is finally, after 24 years, going to be doing sea trials again. She's been in dry dock since 1999, and she's finally coming out of dry dock. Well, I keep saying dry dock. She was in refit for 20-some years. And she's going to start doing sea trials in 2023 with all of her new systems. I can't wait to see what the new girl looks like. She still has a lot of the scaffolding around her superstructure, so you can't really get a good view of her. But we expect her to have all the latest electronic warfare suites, fire control systems and radars, and of course the missiles as well. It'll be interesting to see what she looks like whenever she's finally finished. So the Kirov nuclear-powered cruiser, this is from Naval News, written by Xavier Vassover. He writes, the Kirov nuclear-powered cruiser, Project 11442M, modernized, Admiral Nakhimov, which is currently being repaired and upgraded in Sevmash shipyard, will enter sea trials in 2023, so over a year from now. Deputy CEO of Military Shipbuilding says. Let's see if we can get an improved picture. It's a little bit bigger. It's still not a great shot. They're intentionally keeping the camera below the deck line so you can't see the deck. But we expect there to be a big VLS right here now. Okay. Let's go back to the piece. TASS, the Russian news agency, says, we can say that our work is proceeding on schedule. I believe the cruiser will start sea trials in 2023, Korolyov said. He must be a representative of the shipyard. Anyway, while upgrading the Admiral Nakhimov cruiser, the shipyard will have to deal with a lot of issues relating to the warship's power plant. Its weapons, radio, electronic armament specialists are carrying out large-scale work on the cruiser's missile system. The pace of the work of the Admiral Nakhimov demonstrates Sevmash shipbuilders can construct nuclear-powered missile-carrying submarines and restore technical readiness of such unique warships, such as the Project 1144 Orlan class heavy nuclear-powered cruisers. So they're building submarines basically while they're doing this, is what they're saying. Hey, look at we can do two things at once, which is actually, it's a good thing for them. Okay, so Admiral Nakhimov has been under repair in Sevmash since 1999, but real work did not start until 2013 because they just didn't have the money, the manpower, or the time to do it. So it sat there for 14 years waiting for something to happen to it. And they finally got going. And now it's going to enter sea trials in 2023. It was supposed to do it in 2021, but lots of things got in the way of that. Okay, so during the upgrade, here's what we know about it. The cruiser strike capability has been enhanced. The ship will carry the Caliber, or the SSN-27 Sizzler, and the Onyx, the Strobel, missile systems. In the future, Admiral Nakhimov will get the Zarkon hypersonic missiles as well. Those hypersonic missiles are still in testing. There are some knuckleheads on YouTube that tell me that this is an operational missile. It is not. It is in testing still. I hate repeating myself, you know. For the record, Admiral Nakhimov says Project 114 Orlan is named the Kalinin until 1992. Okay, that's how I knew it was as the Kalinin. It was laid down in 1983. This is just the history of it, launched in 86. We have a whole subbrief on the Kirov class that goes over these dates and talks about all the capability, including this shipyard period. So if you want to know more about that, definitely go to the Patreon page and watch the Kirov subbrief. All right, what do you guys think of the Kirov coming back, huh? It's a badass ship. It's an absolute icon of the Cold War. I mean, you see the ship on the horizon, she cuts a good line, man. It's a sharp looking warship and it's big as hell. It's a huge ship, very large. Vodka delays. Yeah, vodka could have been involved, but I think mostly it was money and manpower. All right. Somebody says you got to go. Have a good one, man. Enjoy it. Chipper says, in my opinion, in every way, apart from the Aegis and the SM-2, the Russians are over. A decade ahead of us, or over a decade ahead of the United States in rocket and missile technology. Yes, I would agree with that. Nowadays, it's harder for me to tell because I know we have some really advanced missiles in the United States that are not public, we don't talk about, and I don't know about them either because we don't talk about them. So I really don't know how advanced we are right now. But Russia and China, they love to, and North Korea, they love to show off all their new technology and their new missiles with their military parades and public propaganda videos on YouTube, especially. There's a beautiful channel. I forget the name of it, but they often do these hour-long exposés on Russian submarines and naval ships and missile technologies. It's sponsored by RT and the Russian government, but the channel is called something else. It's really good. If anyone knows what it is, put it in the chat, and I'll definitely give it a shout. The new LRAM looks promising. Yeah, it does. Yeah. Combat approved. Thank you. Yeah, that's the series I'm talking about. I think the channel on YouTube is called something else, but Combat Approved is the Russian-sponsored, state-sponsored series that I'm talking about. Okay, let's move on to Canada. Okay, Canada is getting a new radar for their Hornets. Apparently, they fly the old F-18 Alpha Bravo, which is still a very capable plane, But this piece from the WarZone, written by Joseph Therovic, goes over the new changes that are coming to the Canadian Air Force. From the piece, Joseph writes, Raytheon has secured a deal worth approximately $140 million. I wonder if that's Canadian dollars. To the APG for an APG 79 version 4 active electronic scanning array, or AESA radars, for the Royal Canadian Air Force. This radar is one of, if not the most important component of the badly needed upgrade package. That is the least some of the Canadians' Hornet fighters are set to receive in the coming years. Details about the Hornet extension program, which you can read about in the link there if you want to read more about it, come over to the WarZone, you can do that, have emerged publicly late last year. When did this piece publish? Okay, it was this week. I just want to make sure we're reading some current. Okay. Raytheon's Intelligence and Space Division announced that it had received a contract for an unspecified number of radars on September 23rd. Well, that was like yesterday. The U.S. Naval Air Systems Commander, NAVAIR, is overseeing the purchase of the radars for Canada through the U.S. government's Foreign Military Sales, or FMS, program. That's just for security reasons, stuff like that. This arrangement makes good sense for contracting perspective, as well as with regard to the economies for scale. Since NAVAIR is already buying the APG 79-4 as part of a separate upgrade program for a portion of the U.S. Marine Corps, the legacy FA-18AD Hornet fleet, the V4 version of this radar is a scaled down and enhanced derivative of the APG 79V1 found on the Super Hornets. All right, so they're going to get a better radar. It's not as good as the Super Hornet, but it's really good for what they need. It's probably a little bit cheaper too. Oh, there we go. We got a nice picture of it. Look at this phased array right here. Can we play this? Northrop Grumman probably can play this. Let's see.
Small air-to-air targets.
All right, so that's a big thing that we should point out, because John and I love flying the F-18 and DCS, and we have two modes. You have air-to-air and air-to-ground. In reality, the modern fighters have that capability at the same time. You can do an air-to-ground sweep, point out targets while you continue to search for air-to-air. And part of it being able to do that is it doesn't have to physically move. And these radars haven't had to physically move for a long time. But I'm glad they're actually making this public now. It's a phased array sort of radar where the beamformer steers the beams left to right, up and down. And it has the ability, because it's all done in the beamformer, to do air-to-ground and air-to-air at the same time. This is the first time I've heard that public, so I'm glad we can finally talk about that. That's probably not news if you're an aviation junkie, but for the rest of us, this is news. This is over 10 years old. Wow, okay. So it's not exactly news at all that they have this capability. I did think that the video looked kind of aged, but yeah, look at that. He's talking about 2010 was when this was recorded. He's talking about 2009. Anyway, so congrats to the Canadians. They're getting an improved radar. Now that improvement is still happening this year. That is news. But that interview was like over 10 years old. Look at this though. They're fitting that onto the Marine Corps F-18 there. That's the A through D. And that's a protective cover, it looks like, on top of it. Very cool stuff. All right, any of you aviation buffs in the chat? You guys have anything to the salesman's retired? Yeah, he probably is. Yeah, with as old as that video was. You remember watching Phased Array Radar documentary in 2008? Yeah, so yeah, that's been public for a long time.